Always fish the water that's close in first, because there's guaranteed going to be some fish laying on this current seam right here and close in on the shoreline. It's a mistake to just go out there and just start fishing further away to start with. What we're going to do is start with a length of line, roughly speaking about the length of the rod, which as you know is around 11 foot in length anyway. And we're going to fish our flies on a kind of a dead drift track to start with. Obviously when they get downstream we can't fish on dead drift anymore, but we can control the pace of those flies. So we initiate first the presentation across stream. Do not mend the line at all, just let the flies dead drift and trap. By raising the rod up and just bringing the rod tip straight out across stream, what we allow the flies to do is hang directly on the dangle downstream. By bringing the rod across to our right, we can control the speed of the flies as they track back towards us directly downstream on the dangle.
Somewhat slows the descent, I guess you could say, of the fly downstream too.
You're slowing the pace of the flies down, giving the fish more and more time to see them. And certainly if you're fishing fairly small flies, well, you've got to give the fish more time to see them. What I'm going to do is initiate a short line presentation, basically at an across angle from where we are. I'm going to hold the rod up, let the flies drift, dead drift fashion.
You're about 45 degrees upstream.
At roughly that angle, and let the flies just come round to the dangle downstream. Now, you know, fish can hit us anywhere along this angle.
I think they'll pick it up and follow it down there.
I've seen them do
cases.
that many times. The thing to remember is don't overcast. Just short line fish the zone that's directly in front of you, and just let the rod move round to the right and bring the flies round.
Let the river do all your work for you.
No, not at all. There's one thing you have to consider here. If we just throw that line on the surface of the water without moving our rod, obviously the flies and our line is influenced by the downward drift and movement of that water. And in cases such as this, those flies are moving pretty fast. Now we need to control that and stop that happening. And there's one effective way to do that. We initiate the cast and the delivery. When the flies are tracked slightly a little ways downstream, we just bring the rod upstream, and what effectively that does, it keeps the flies out from us. See, the rod is holding the line and the flies out. Now as we move the rod tip to our right, then of course what you actually do is lead the flies. Technically that's what we call it, you lead the flies. So you can slow down the process of
the swing. Gotcha.
You make your presentation, you let it dead drift, you come to a point where you're on the tight line, you just hold the rod tip out, the flies are now held out, one rod length out or just a little bit more from us. Now as we move the rod tip around to the right, we can lead those flies, we can control them.
And much slower swing too.
Oh, definitely. And during that process, we can actually correct that. We can keep moving from left to right, moving the flies quick, moving the flies slow.
You know, just a small mend, it corrects it, or
it
changes.
Allows those flies to be seen more so effectively by the fish, as opposed to those flies all of a sudden just sweeping across the path of the fish, which a lot of times will cause the fish to follow but refuse. And if you do that too many times, well, they will lose interest anyway. The more you can kind of keep those flies in the fish's vision for a longer period of time, a lot of times the more positive the results are going to be. Keep the rod out, let the line and flies track, move the line to the left, holds the flies in dead, what we call on the dangle. They're basically just hanging straight downstream. Once we track the rod to the right, then the flies move across to the right.
So in effect, you're changing the angle of the dangle?
Absolutely right. Yeah, angle of the dangle. I never heard it quite put like that, but that's a good way of saying it.
But you are. That's a good way to remember it too.
Across, mend. It's not really a mend,
it's just
actually.
A slight mend. It's more of a lay up the.
It's a controlled.
Lay across the river.
That's right. It's a controlled movement of the rod, which allows you to fish the flies at a far, far slower pace.
So slight you could watch someone else do it and not even pick up that they're doing that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Even in water that might be going at 30 miles an hour, you have an ultimate control of how you get those flies to swim by the technique of just moving to the right, flies move across, and to the left, the flies will move slow.
You cover a lot of river that way too.
You certainly can.
Effortlessly.
And you can fish it very, very effectively
too. That's what I meant by letting the river do most of the work for you. you're not physically exerting yourself to do this, yet you're covering the whole water column, a broad spectrum of the tail out of the pool right there, but just moving the rod.
Absolutely right. And notice also that I'm not really using my left hand at this point of time to do anything, because I'm fishing a short line and it really serves no purpose anyway. All I need to do is just control the line under my first finger. Now, one little tip I will tell you is this, is if you're fishing a piece of water and you know that there's the likelihood of some big fish in there, I will tell you to let the fish strike basically off the reel. What I mean by that is this: you make a presentation. At this point of time, if you get a fish strike the flies, you're usually going to see it, or you're going to see the line move, you're going to see some surface activity. Once we're on a downstream, and we may be fishing small flies and very light tippet too, that's another thing, we don't want that initial shot bang because we've got it gripped here. I set the reel so pretty much it's on a very, very minimum of drag. And if the fish should grasp the fly, well, it'll actually draw a line from the reel. And that in itself will absorb that initial hard shock that may occur if you grip the line here too tightly. And most people instinctively, when they feel a take or a strike, they're going to grip that hard.
Right.
Boom,
Right.
fish is gone.
They've taught themselves that instinct.
Yep. So upstream presentation or cross, let the flies drift, natural pace of the water, slow the flies down, bring the rod tip out, follow the flies around really, really slowly as you move around, giving the fish plenty of time to see your flies.
What a lot of people don't understand, me included, is, I've spent 20 or 30 years matching the hatch, the technique of the hatch, every phase of the insect and everything, totally drag-free drifts, no micro drag or anything. But with this, we're actually sort of dragging the fly across the current, which is unnatural for an insect that's hatching and floating straight down the current. Why do the fish respond so violently to this? They hit so very hard at the end of that drift.
I know. I guess a lot of it really has to do with quite simply this, is that they see something that to them looks like a food form and they see it at a point where they think it's going to escape. It's either going to get out through the surface of the water or it's actually going to take off to the bankside, and they want it before it does that. And you're right, they will hit you very, very hard at times when they do that.
Oh yeah.
And certainly the higher the fish are in the surface or your flies are in the surface, the harder you're going to feel that because there's nothing to absorb the shock. You have got no sunk line. If he was fishing this technique with, say, an intermediate or a slow sinker or something like that, we do have something to absorb that kick, when the fish grabs our flies. And that's why with surface techniques are concerned, particularly with floating lines, it's so important to have 100% control over what you're doing. And that little technique I explained to you there, by having this reel drag set virtually to the absolute minimum, basically just holding that, is usually the best way to avoid just getting broken straight like that.
This short line across stream presentation of wet flies on a dry line seems straightforward enough. But with so many of Davy's tactics, there is more to it than meets the eye. In general, the cast is made across and slightly upstream. The rod position is relatively low after the delivery, and the flies are allowed to dead drift until the current influences them. At this point, where it's directly across from you, when the current influences the drift, a slight rod bend as opposed to a more dramatic line bend is executed to slow down the flies. Now you are in direct contact with your cast and need to track or position the flies in the likely current seams and work them with slight twitches of the tip. As the flies line up downstream, or on the dangle as it's called, slight rod bends can be added to completely cover the likely water below you. Again, like in the upstream presentation, wait only a leader's length down or upstream if you feel you have fished the spot you're in adequately.